Hey everyone, welcome to another Jeff the IT Guy video. Today we're going to be talking about phone interviews, right? So phone interviews, they're a different kind of beast than what an in-person interview is. And if you're like me, you probably get more nervous for phone interviews. And the reason behind that is because you can't read body language over the phone, right? You can't look at facial expressions. The only thing you've got to go off of is the tonality in someone's voice. And it can be really tough. If you're like me and like so many other people, you really need to be able to see someone's body language and their facial expressions to gauge how you continue on in the conversation. And so it boosts your confidence, if you say the right thing, right? Because if you're in an in-person interview and you say the right thing, they might smile. You can look at their body language and tell that they're impressed with you. However, when you're on the phone, you're not going to have that. They might say good, good, but you're not going to have, the facial expressions to go off of. And so phone interviews, like I said, they're a different kind of beast. And you should prepare for a phone interview. You should be ready to have a phone interview. Because as soon as you hit the submit button on an application, you should expect a phone call. And when you expect a phone interview phone call, then you can prepare for it. And so I always tell my friends, I've always told myself that as soon as I submit an application, I expect a phone call. And it's not because I'm cocky and then I just assume that everyone wants to give me a phone call and offer me a job, but it's so that I can prepare. And so when you look back at my video that's going to be linked up here, the 5 tips for nailing an interview, when you look back at it, you can prepare for that in-person interview, but it's not because I'm cocky, it's because I want to be prepared for that phone interview so that I can do my best, right? And so you need to have some confidence about it as well. And so in a phone interview, you're going to get asked pretty much an onslaught of questions. And these questions, they can range from technical skills to all the way to your personal interest. And these questions, they have a purpose, right? The technical questions, they're so that the person interviewing you can ascertain what is your technical knowledge. What is your experience? If you're interviewing for a junior level position, they probably want to know that you can handle object-oriented principles, right? So they're probably going to ask you questions like, what is overloading? What is overriding? What is a method? What's a class? They're going to ask you questions like this so that they can get a grasp of how well you do with OOP. If you're going in for a mid-level developer position, they're probably not going to ask you as many OOP-oriented questions, but they're probably going to ask you some of the tougher OOP. They might ask you about inheritance or, when you would use overloading versus overriding. They're going to ask you deeper questions about the language that you're actually applying for. They might ask you if you know anything about web services, and if so, was it REST or was it SOAP? They're going to ask about APIs, and they're going to ask, about your experiences using those. If you're applying for a senior level position, you can expect a lot of questions about what your experiences are and if you've accomplished certain things. And they're going to ask if you have experience with different parts of that language that go deeper into it, right? And so you're not going to ask a junior dev if they know what a singleton class is. But that could be something that you ask a mid or a senior level position. A junior is probably not going to be asked about link, but a senior probably will, and so will a mid. And so you need to be prepared for those types of questions. And I know we're talking about programming languages, but let's shift focus in the IT world as well. Let's shift to maybe networking. Right? If you're going in and this is your first networking job, they're probably going to ask you about the 7 layers of a network. Right? They're going to ask you if you understand what each of those layers are for. They'll probably ask if you've ever used a command line interface to set up a router, or if you have any experience with a certain brand of router. And the more that you move up in your field, then they're going to start asking tougher questions like, can you set up a subnet, a VPN? When would you use a subnet? When would you use a VPN? Can you do site-to-site with a VPN? Can you do this inside of Cisco? Can you do that inside of Ubiquiti? These are the questions that you're going to get asked the further that you move up. And that's the way it is with anything in IT. your knowledge is not at one single point in time, but it compounds throughout your career. Right? So for example, with myself, I'm a director of IT. Now I can program, I can do networking, I can do system admin work, I can work with servers, I can work with Linux and Windows and Mac. I'm not a master at all of those, but I understand enough so that I can make decisions that impact my company. But if you're not going for my role, if you're going to be, an application architect, a software architect, you're going to want to know your skill so well that you can look at a problem and say, okay, this is how we're going to solve it. And this is what we're going to use. And plan it all out. Right? So you have to compound that knowledge in one single thing. It's almost like you have a niche. Okay? And so the second set of questions that they're going to ask is about personal interest. Right? They're going to ask things like, what are your hobbies? What is it that you do in your spare time? Do you prefer Star Wars or Star Trek? Do you play video games? Do you go to the gym? Do you play music? All these different things are going to be asked, and it's so that they can get to know you on a personal level to see if you're going to mesh with their team. Right? They want to know your personal interests to see if maybe there's other people on their team that have that same interest. Right? Because in IT, we're all about teams as well. I know people like to say that we're the stereotypical introvert, that we don't want to talk to anyone, that we hang out in the basement, and no one talks to us, or we're over in this corner and we segregate ourselves. But the truth about it is that in IT, we have to work as a team. Right? We have to work with other people in the company, and we have to work within IT ourselves. So they're going to ask you questions about that. And thirdly, they're going to ask you questions to see if you mesh with their culture. And this is going to be a little bit deeper than just personal interest questions. The questions about culture are also going to mix with your experience. And so they're going to ask questions about what sort of projects have you worked on? And during those projects, what was the toughest part of it? What was the experience of it? What you learned from it? Right? They're going to ask you questions about all of that. They're going to see if you had any trouble with your superior, or if you had any trouble with other people on the team. And they're just going to ask these questions so that they can get a gauge on whether or not you match with their culture. And the reason for that is because sometimes culture in a company can be almost the number one factor in hiring. I have worked for companies to where culture trumped experience, where it trumped knowledge, and where it trumped just about everything else. It was all about the culture. I've worked in those companies. I've also worked in companies to where it was all about knowledge and experience and technical skills, and they didn't care about culture, and they would just run you until you were burnt out and you left, and all they've seen it as a seat to fill so that they could bill their customer. Right? And so a lot of interviews are going to ask about these sort of questions. Right? And so this is pretty much the three components to a phone interview. Right? Technical questions, personal interest, experience, and culture. We'll put experience and culture into one sort of group. Right? Those are about the three main things. Of course, you can talk about salary, you can talk about the total compensation of your package, about 401ks, insurance, what you can wear to work, what you wear to work, where the work is, what sort of projects you'll be working on. These are also all other questions that you should ask. You should ask what your salary is going to be, what the total compensation is, what's benefits like, what's PTO like, what can you wear to work, all the things that I've mentioned. These are things that you should ask the person on the phone as well. And a lot of times, this phone interview can be what goes between the time that you apply and the time that you have an in-person interview. And sometimes this phone interview can be the only interview that you have. Listen, if this has helped you, let me know. Leave a comment down below and let me know if this video has helped you, because that's why I do this. I want to help aspiring IT professionals. I want you all to not be so afraid or nervous about taking a phone interview, but whenever you hit that submit button for your application, that you are ready and you're prepared to nail it. Right? There is over 1 million IT jobs in the US right now that are unfilled, and they need to be filled with people like you. Right? And so if you haven't, subscribe to the channel. There's going to be a lot of different videos like this, as well as, you know, tech reviews and builds and things. And if you haven't liked it, leave a like. And if you dislike it, leave a dislike. You know? And listen, once again, I really do hope that this has helped someone. And I thank everyone who watches this. Tell all your friends. Right? Tell all your friends. If you know someone who's looking for a job, tell them to look up Jeff the IT guy, and hopefully I can help them as well. Listen, you all have a great day, and good luck out there.